पे जा रहे हैं, सबको डाल दो। आप डालोगे, हमने अपने आप जाना है?
So a very good afternoon. The topic for today's discussion is voiding disorders in children. So this is a very old and famous picture by Joseph Wright in 1767 entitled Two Boys Blow a Bladder. The properties of the human bladder have always intrigued the human race. The bladder wall has got unique property of elasticity. It is able to store urine at low pressure and then store it without leakage till a point is reached where the urge to pass urine is initiated. And also the transitional epithelium, which was previously thought to be inert, is now known. It produces many protective substances which prevents a urinary tract infection from happening. So in older ancient literature also there are mentions about nocturnal enuresis and the various therapies which were tried in that era, like reed extract, phytotherapy, a toad tied to the penis of the boy, belladonna strychnine for overactive bladder. So now we should try to find out, are we doing any better in the 21st century? So this was a recent school-based study. This was done by my respected colleague, Dr. Ranjit Thirgaonkar. I should acknowledge him because I have used some of his slides in this presentation. In this study, they did a questionnaire-based survey about lower urinary tract dysfunction and nocturnal enuresis in a secondary school. And they also assessed the perceptions of the teachers, and they paired a Hassel scale for the teachers. So the prevalence of lower urinary tract dysfunction in Indian school children was found to be 4.7% for enuresis and 3.6% for lower other voiding disorders. So traditionally this figure prevalence of enuresis is around 7 to 12%. And for 30 to 40% of the teachers, the repeated toilet requests by children were a cause of stress. And there is other detailed data provided, but this study was done in children of upper middle class and upper class. So we assume that prevalence of these disorders is likely to be more in the poor socioeconomic strata. So next question is, who should manage the
Dr.
bladder
Swati,
problems in children?
sorry. Why
Yes,
do
sir.
they presume that it should be
Yeah.
more in the lower socioeconomic strata?
But
Any reason
traditionally,
for thinking that way?
because the perceptions of the parents and as I will discuss, there are many psychological issues associated with these disorders. And they also found in their survey that in previous surveys that parental education, their employment, etc., also affects the prevalence of these disorders. Family conflict is an important cause, can be an important cause of voiding disorders. So that is the reason they assumed, because these children were those in the naval school. So they assumed that the parents are educated, and that was the reason.
But there is statistical evidence that this is more common in the lower
Yes, I will
socioeconomic
show that
status.
psychosocial comorbidities are associated with voiding disorders. I'll show in my subsequent slides.
Okay.
So who should manage bladder problems in children? A family physician, pediatrician, pediatric nephrologist, a neurologist, urologist, or pediatric surgeon? Anybody? Opinion from the house? So whoever is willing to invest time in the patient, this is a difficult area, and it requires a lot of time and patience both on the part of the treating physician as well as the family. So whoever is willing to invest time in the patient should be the best person to treat and manage these disorders. So first I will start with the anatomy and physiology. The neurological innervation of the bladder and its function is controlled by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic outflow from the thoracolumbar region innervates the muscle and it causes relaxation of the detrusor. through the beta receptors and closure of the bladder neck through the alpha receptors. So sympathetic system is responsible for the filling phase of the bladder, or we can say stop, while the parasympathetic system is responsible for the initiation of micturition. So the parasympathetic outflow leads to contraction of the detrusor muscle and relaxation of the bladder neck, while the pudendal nerve, motor neurons in the pudendal nerve, they cause the contraction of the external urethral sphincter in the resting state. So this is about the spinal micturition center. Then there is a pontine micturition center and cerebral cortex, which is able to modulate the desire to micturate. So previously it was believed that newborns void by reflex, but this is not true. There is some control by the pontine micturition center, because newborns never while they pass urine, and gradually as the age advances, the maturation happens. So by 4 years of age, the adult type voiding pattern is established. So the order of control is nighttime first fecal continence is achieved, followed by daytime fecal continence, followed by daytime urinary continence, and nighttime urine continence happens late, mostly by 5 years of age, but bedwetting up to 7 years of age may also be considered, may also be acceptable. And how does this happen? Due to ADH secretion starts maturing. There is increase in bladder capacity with increasing age. The child acquires awareness of bladder fullness and ability to voluntarily suppress the detrusor contractions. And finally, the detrusor sphincter coordination. So these three things are required for adult type of voiding pattern, where you can voluntarily pass urine and control when it is not socially inappropriate to pass urine. So few questions. What is the formula for estimated bladder volume between 2 to 12 years of age? Is it age plus 2 into 30? Vincent's curtsy is a sign of Hinman syndrome. Social stress causes voiding disorder. And dysfunctional voiding symptom score is used in evaluation of enuresis. So I'll give the answers as well. So this is Koff's formula, which we use for estimating the expected bladder capacity for a child aged 2 to 12 years of age. And Vincent's curtsy, as I will discuss in detail, is a sign of overactive bladder. It's a holding maneuver. Social stress causes increased bladder contractility through the corticotropin release hormone, and dysfunctional voiding symptom score, or DVSS, is used for evaluation of voiding disorders, not simply enuresis. So going to clinical evaluation. So the International Childhood Continence Society has given new terminology where these disorders, any symptoms of lower urinary tract dysfunction together with the presence of constipation, this is now called bladder bowel dysfunction. Previously used term dysfunctional elimination syndrome is obsolete now. And incontinence may be a common symptom, which means leakage of urine, involuntary passage of urine. It may be continuous. Continuous is almost always due to anatomical causes. It may be intermittent, and then it can be further divided into daytime incontinence, which happens during daytime, and enuresis that happens during sleep. And whether it is associated with any other lower urinary tract symptoms, it may be monosymptomatic or non-monosymptomatic. And if the child has never been dry for more than 6 months, it is called primary enuresis. And if the child has been previously dry for more than 6 months, and again enuresis starts, this is called secondary enuresis. So types of incontinence, and this definition given by ICCS does not include the frequency, a minimum number of incontinence episodes which should be present to call it incontinence. Even one incontinence episodes is incontinence. It may be stress incontinence due to increased intra-abdominal pressure. Usually this happens when the pelvic floor muscles are weak. Urge incontinence, this is associated with symptom of urgency. Urgency is a sudden desire to pass urine, which is usually not suppressible. And this is the cardinal symptom of overactive bladder. It may be overflow incontinence, maybe due to myogenic detrusor failure, the bladder is full, the detrusor is not able to initiate micturition and there is overflow, and neurogenic incontinence due to impaired functioning of the nervous system. So in this presentation, I would be chiefly addressing functional voiding disorders. I would not be addressing those due to anatomical problems or due to associated with neurogenic bladder. So what are the other symptoms of bladder disorders or voiding disorders? Frequency, a child, these terms and even the bladder disorders apply to children who are toilet trained, that is who are more than 5 years of age. In younger children, this terminology is not applicable. Normal urine frequency is between 5 to 8 times. So if a child voids less than 5 times, less than 5 times a day, less than 3 times a day, sorry, it is 3 to 8, less than 3 times a day is infrequent voiding, and more than 8 times it is increased frequency of voiding. Incontinence, as I said, is involuntary leakage of urine. Urgency is sudden urge to pass urine, which is not suppressible, and this is involuntary. Nocturia means getting up more than once at night to pass urine. And these symptoms are related to the storage phase, the filling phase of the bladder, and the voiding phase symptoms are hesitancy, means difficulty in initiation of micturition. Straining is the use of abdominal muscles for maintaining the urinary stream. This may be normal in young children. Weak stream or interrupted stream, and dysuria is pain during micturition. These are some of the common symptoms, and one needs to classify whether the symptoms relate to the storage phase or filling phase of the bladder or voiding. Accordingly, we can then reach to the diagnosis. Other symptoms may be holding maneuvers, voiding, postponement, feeling of incomplete emptying. Only older children can report this. Urinary retention, post-micturition dribble, spraying of the stream may sometimes be present in anterior urethral walls, or bladder, urethral or genital pain. Usually only older children, these are not common symptoms, only older children can perceive these. Always ask for symptoms of constipation because it is a common bystander, and management of constipation is equally important. Otherwise, we cannot successfully address these voiding disorders. So coming to curtsy, in British English, or it's a traditional gesture of greeting in Western world where a woman bends her knees to, it's a greeting basically. So it was seen in 1966. This was first described in an 8-year-old girl with non-holding maneuver. The child presses the heel in the perineum in order to hold the urine, and this child would sit in this position for prolonged periods to avoid going to the washroom. It is both diagnostic and prognostic. It can predict the benefits of pelvic exercises in the management of voiding disorder. So this is Vincent's curtsy. Vincent first described this. So there are other holding maneuvers as well, other than Vincent's curtsy, like crossing of the leg. The boys may be seen pressing their hand in the perineum. So one should ask for such holding maneuvers. Children are usually not aware of these, that they are doing this, but parents can usually agree that they have observed a child doing such maneuvers. So evaluation of voiding disorders, goal is to identify whether the disorder relates to the abnormal filling phase or the emptying phase, and to identify the cause, which may be neurogenic, which is due to defective innervation of the bladder. Anatomic, in this, anatomic causes, a normal voiding pattern never develops, like posterior urethral valves, or a child would always have voiding disorder right from the beginning. A normal voiding never develops. And in this presentation, I've mainly focused on the functional disorder, which are due to maturation delay, or they could be due to abnormal habits acquired during toilet training. So what are the tools of evaluation? As for any other clinical disorder, history is foremost, most important. One should ask for symptoms of bladder dysfunction. If the parents report, one should ask in detail. Then we should also know the voiding schedule, frequency of voids, frequency of incontinence episodes, estimation of the voided volumes, and 24-hour fluid intake as well. Then you need to know history of any family history, that is important for nocturnal enuresis, history of any family conflict, a perinatal history, if there has been some ostomy neonatal course, if the child is likely to have developmental disorders, they may also be associated with voiding disorders, dietary fiber intake, history of toilet training, that's also very important. History of constipation, one can use Rome 4 criteria and Bristol stool chart. Constipation was the topic constipation was taken by Dr. Deepak Goyal couple of weeks back, so I would not be going into details of this. And for nowadays, the screen time is also relevant because that may be a reason for voiding postponement. The children simply do not go to the washroom. So there are certain scales. One of this is dysfunctional voiding symptom score. It has questions, and the scores vary from 0 to 3 depending on whether how frequently does had wet clothes or wet underwear during the day, and the degree of wetness. When I wet myself, my clothes are soaked. About the bowel frequency of bowel movement, about the urine frequency, whether the child holds urine, whether there are symptoms of urgency, about straining, dysuria, and the parents also ask, has there been a stressful event? For females, the cutoff more than 6 is considered abnormal, or for males, it is 9. And recent social, one should also assess the social situation in the family, like arrival of a new baby, new home, school problems, special events, sexual or possibility of sexual or physical abuse in case the problems are of recent onset. So one should assess all this. And there is another score like dysfunctional voiding and incontinence symptom score, DVISS, that also assesses incontinence and quality of life, perception of the quality of life. So as I previously mentioned, psychosocial issues may be associated. It may some consider which can precede or even induce a relapse. And there is some underlies common neurobiological dysfunction, and they may exist. Some even believe they may coexist by chance, and they may be causing or internalizing, and they impact both the children and parents alike. A study assessed the prevalence of and common psychosocial comorbidities in these children. So ADHD, autistic spectrum disorder, these and dysfunctional families, family conflict, these were found to be associated in a large proportion of children. So ICCS recommends a child behavior checklist or a short screening instrument for our scenario, but one should try to assess, and we should keep a low threshold for consultation with the mental health professional if one perceives that such problem may be associated. So next comes the clinical examination. One should look for any dysmorphism. One should carefully examine the spine for the tuft of hair, lipoma, deviated gluteal cleft, low limb power, deep tendon jerks, perineum examination of the genitals. One should rule out meatal stenosis or labial adhesions. Look for superficial reflexes, abdomen scars for surgery, stomas, and palpable bladder, and impacted feces for rectal examination for impacted feces. So when it comes to the investigations, first and most important investigation is a well-maintained bladder diary, gives a very useful information. A 24-hour record would be helpful in detecting incontinence episodes, but for identifying the expected bladder volumes and other details, a 48 or 72-hour record is better. So what we record the time of each void throughout that 24-hour or 48-hour period, voided volume with each void, were there any symptoms of urgency and episodes of incontinence, together with the stool chart as well. So this is a and we can know, we can use the Bristol stool chart for assessment. From this bladder diary, we try to know the maximum voided volume that should be equivalent to the expected bladder capacity for that age. We can know the frequency of urination and voided volume each time also. If there are small frequent void, that tells us this is could be small bladder capacity. And comparing the 24-hour urine output with the 24-hour water intake, we can also correlate, and we can also assess the frequency of the incontinence episodes and symptoms like urgency. Then when needed, when a UTI is suspected, sometimes these children may have recurrent UTI associated. One needs to rule that out by doing a urine analysis and urine culture. And further, one can do an ultrasound for kidney size, hydronephrosis, bladder volume, post-void residue, and bladder wall thickness. Post-void residue should be assessed within 5 minutes of voiding, uh, and a volume more than 20 ml, in excess of 20 ml is significant. Then one can also, in infants, a 4-hour voiding observation in which a baby is allowed to observe for 4 hours. When the baby passes urine spontaneously, the amount of urine is measured by diaper weighing, and an ultrasound is also done to assess for any post-void residue. So this is a kind of voiding diary. This is difficult to do, but this is a voiding diary done for an infant. So most of the children will need this basic evaluation, but if there is failure to improve with conservative management, or we suspect a neurological anatomical abnormality, before we consider starting pharmacological therapy, if there is continuous incontinence, if it is associated with recurrent UTI or reflux, there is suspected renal damage or proteinuria or deranged renal functions, then we need detailed evaluation, which includes a urological imaging, MCUG and MRI of the spine, urinary flow measurements, and urodynamic studies. So uroflowmetry is a peak flowmetry of the bladder. The child voids into this instrument, and a flow rate, voided volume, and time can be calculated from this. And the shape of the curve also gives us information. It may be combined with the pelvic electromyography that gives us information about the urethral sphincter. And cytometry is the measurement of the bladder filling pressure, resting pressures, and together with the rectal catheter to measure the intra-abdominal pressure. And cystometry is invasive test, and nowadays we have urodynamic studies, detailed urodynamic studies. This is a typical normal curve for a urodynamic study. As we can see in the bottom of the panel, the bladder pressure gradually rises until when voiding happens, the pressure rapidly declines and again it starts building up, because the bladder, this is bladder volume, again starts building up. But the bladder, this is a flow, urine flow rate. It reaches a peak during maturation. The bladder pressure doesn't rise much when as the filling progresses. If it rises only the urethral pressure, that is the sphincter pressure, is high. In the resting stage, the sphincter relaxes, as one can see in the electromyography record in the top panel also. So this coordination of detrusor contraction and sphincter relaxation is very important, and this urodynamic study can give us very valuable information in children with who are resistant to treatment with conservative measures. One should go ahead with the urodynamic studies. So in general management, first we start with the non-invasive and conservative management. That involves change of voiding behavior. So for that, you need to know the voiding habits of the child, explain what is age appropriate norm to the family, and set an individualized voiding regimen as per the requirements of that child and the family. We need to put the children on timed voiding schedule every 2 to 3 hours, particularly children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Use of wrist alarms improves the success of this schedule. The voiding posture should be correct. If using Western toilet seat, one should always make sure to put a footrest below the stool so that feet are flat on the ground and knees are slightly at the higher level, and the posture should be leaning forward. This is the correct posture. And this holds true for constipation as well. And child should pass urine every 2 to 3 hours and sit on the toilet seat for a fixed period of time that is equal to age of the child. If a child is 7 years old, they should be advised to sit on the toilet seat for 7 minutes 2 times a day at a time when a bowel movement is more likely to happen. So this is very important before initiating pharmacological treatment, and document this process on the voiding diary before and after treatment, the progress of the child, and establish a reward system, positive reinforcement. And reward should not be achieving the goal. Reward should be set for following the program, the following the task which has been given, not for that the child achieves the goal, that the voiding disorder has resolved. So one should use positive reinforcement, and one needs frequent assessments, repeated motivation of the family as well as the child, and this can be successful only when. So some of the children will require directed therapy with, and we have options of pharmacological therapy. So some of the drugs I would be discussing. Pelvic floor relaxation measures, particularly in children where there is who perform holding maneuvers and when there is problems in the voiding phase. Biofeedback is a pelvic muscle retraining where the child learns to control the muscle by connecting. This is connected to an animated program, so child is aware of which muscle the child is, and child is able to control. This is not available in India, so I could not get any videos for that. And other rarely used therapies are electrical stimulation, botulinum toxin injection in the urethral sphincter, surgery like bladder augmentation for neurogenic bladder, and clean intermittent catheterization. So specific disorders, overactive bladder, urgency is the cardinal feature. One should start with conservative management, and if not successful, one can consider using anticholinergic medications. Commonly used ones are oxybutynin, tolterodine, and solifenacin. And in refractory cases, the beta-3 agonist, which causes detrusor muscle relaxation, mirabegron. This has been a recent addition. Underactive bladder, one needs to follow timed voiding and double voiding, where child voids once, waits for some time, and then voids again to ensure the bladder is completely empty. And those cases who fail, then one has to do clean intermittent catheterization. For dysfunctional voiding, after conservative management, pelvic floor relaxation exercises is very important, but the child has to be old enough to learn this pelvic floor relaxation. And those cases which are refractory, we need invasive urodynamic study. And for relaxation of the sphincter, one can use alpha blocker, that is tamsulosin. So to discuss few cases, this is a 9-year-old female child who presented with primary nocturnal enuresis. Also, she had daytime symptoms of urgency, frequency, holding maneuvers, and constipation. Clinical examination was unremarkable. This is her voiding diary. So the frequencies increase, and expected bladder capacity for a 9-year-old is around 330 ml, but you see all the maximum voided volume is 150 ml only, and there's symptoms of urgency. So ultrasound was normal, but bladder wall thickness is increased. More than 3 millimeter in a 2 millimeter in a full bladder is considered increased bladder wall thickness. And this was the normal tower shaped curve. So the overactive bladder, her constipation was managed. She was put on a schedule of adequate fluid intake and time voiding along with tolterodine. And these voiding disorders are also associated with low self-esteem. That was addressed, and she is doing well on. And these dose adjustment, these doses may require adjustment, and one need to keep these patients under follow-up and continue motivating them. That is very important for the success of management. So this is a 5-year-old child who presented with recent onset, increased urinary frequency, no urgency, no incontinence, and child, the symptoms of frequency disappeared during sleep. There was no bedwetting. And when he was distracted, he would forget about going to washroom. Examination was unremarkable. So this is a typical case of a pollakiuria or benign increase in urine frequency. The voided diary also confirmed the same, and he was just reassured, in these children you have to put them on a schedule of time, not voiding. During fixed periods in the day, say for 1 or 2 hours, give them target of not going to washroom. Otherwise, one should learn to ignore the symptom. That is the best treatment for this disorder, and it resolves by itself, doesn't require any pharmacological treatment. And the 6-year-old female child had episodes of recurrent UTI for 2 years with difficulty in passing urine and constipation. Voiding diary showed 5 to 9 voids a day, which is normal. Maximum voided volume 100 ml, which is low. And uresis all nights. A staccato flow was seen when a video was made of her voiding. Ultrasound kidneys, again, bladder wall thickness was increased, and there was 20 ml post-void residue. MCOG showed bilateral grade 3 reflux, and urodynamics showed high pressure, low compliance bladder, and this was detrusor sphincter dyssynergia. So this child had dysfunctional voiding syndrome. Constipation was treated. In these children, once you treat them well, the reflux also improves and the recurrent UTI stop happening. She was put on conservative management along with tolterodine and tamsulosin, since the bladder was high pressure and low compliance, and tamsulosin to relax the sphincter. And biofeedback helps these children, but at the most we can treat pelvic floor relaxation exercises. Biofeedback is not available at present, but symptoms reduced markedly, but they persisted. These dysfunctional voiding syndrome, maybe it is difficult to manage. So to summarize, one should take detailed history about the cardinal symptoms which help in differentiate the site and nature of the disorder. One should examine for any anatomical or neurological abnormality. Bladder diary is a very useful tool. However, dropout rate is very high, and ultrasound and further assessment is needed in children who are refractory to management or a neurological anatomical non-invasive test. While select children may need invasive urodynamic studies, and constipation and psychological comorbidity should also be addressed, and one has to individualize the treatment approaches in different children. So this is the popular peeing boy statue in Belgium, and no talk of voiding dysfunction can be complete without a reference to this. So this is all about today's presentation. Is anybody there?
कहाँ गए सारे? सो गए?
I don't know. Dr. Vipul, did it disconnect in between? Or was it okay?
It was okay, but we were getting intermittent where the connection was bad, so your voice was slow, then वापस आता था एकदम से